This is Salesforce Simplified, the podcast from Ad Victoriam Solutions. Here's your host, Mike Boyle.
This is the Salesforce Simplified podcast, as the man said, and I'm Mike Boyle. We are going to be speaking with Salesforce Ben's Courses and Community Director, Christine Marshall, about all of her favorite new things that are inside Salesforce's Winter 24 release. Christine, you look so great in your new winter jacket today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Mike. August and September do feel a little bit early to be talking about winter, but there's so many exciting features. It's going to be great to dive into it today.
Yeah, that was my little joke there. Christine really does not have her winter jacket on, trust me. Well, in addition to her Salesforce Ben duties as Courses and Community Director, Christine is a 10 times Salesforce-Certified Evangelist, and she also serves as a Salesforce Admin Group leader and has been named numerous times as a Salesforce MVP. When we last spoke for the Summer 23 release back in the spring, you were 7 times Salesforce certified. That's a big jump. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I had been a bit lax on getting any new certifications for a while, and I was offered an opportunity to do one of Salesforce's boot camps in London, and it was absolutely amazing. I can't recommend it enough, and that really spurred me on to get another 2 certifications. So I got 3 in the space of 2 weeks, I think.
Well, congratulations to you. And you know what's really great too? I love on social media, Christine, how you are a champion for other folks. You know, when they post, how proud they are, absolutely as they should, of their new certification. You're there cheering them on. And I applaud you for that. I think that's great.
Thank you.
All righty. So you have chosen 6 things for us to call out here for Salesforce's Winter 24 release. So let's get right into them. Number 1 is dynamic forms for standard objects and mobile. Tell me what that one looks like.
So anyone that's read any of my work on Salesforce Ben knows I just love dynamic forms. I think it's such an amazing feature, and it's now been a couple of years in the making. It started off relatively small, and it's just expanding and expanding. Last year at Dreamforce, Salesforce promised that they were going to bring dynamic forms to all standard objects. And with this release, they've now announced that dynamic forms will be available to the majority of Lightning Web Component enabled standard objects. So that is absolutely huge. It does mean that there are a couple of objects that you can't use dynamic forms on because they don't support Lightning Web Components, and that includes things like campaigns, tasks, and products. And then the other hot news is that dynamic forms is going to be generally available for mobile. You will need to enable that in the Salesforce mobile app setup, but it's been a long time coming. It's been in beta recently, but it will be generally available.
Number 2 on our list is called Transfer Dashboard Ownership. That one sounds interesting.
This is such a small little change that I'm sure most people won't realize its significance. But if you work as an admin every day, I think you'll understand why this is so important. So historically, when the owner of a dashboard leaves the company, so they're no longer a Salesforce user, you had the hassle of having to clone or recreate the dashboard, which was time-consuming and tedious. But from Winter 24, you'll be able to transfer ownership of a dashboard to a new owner who will then take on control of that dashboard. So you can carry on with the same dashboard.
I can see a lot of people smiling about that one right now. That's great. Number 3 on our list for Winter Salesforce 24 release is preview summary formulas in Lightning reports. What's behind that one?
So custom report summary formulas are really tricky to do, to be honest. I think they're one of the hardest features of reporting in Salesforce, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people feel quite apprehensive about them. But you can now use the preview image as a reference to better understand how your formula will be used in the live report. So it just helps you know that you're creating the right report summary formula and gives you an idea of what it's going to look like before you actually run the report.
Number 4 on our list is just simply called permissions. There's something there behind the curtain. Tell me about that.
Permissions is huge and is going to be huge for the next couple of years. So we've had a record number of updates to permissions in this release. And the reason for that is the impending retirement of permissions on profiles. So historically, I think most admins would agree that managing profiles on permissions is quite time consuming. It's quite difficult. It's not always obvious what you need to do. And Cheryl Feldman, who now works at Salesforce, was well aware of this issue, and herself and her team have worked so hard over the last couple of years to start working towards retiring permissions on profiles and moving them into permission sets. It's a huge task. And to support that, they keep releasing numerous updates to permissions. So I've got a couple to share with you from the Winter 24 release. So the first one is that you will be able to report on custom permission sets and permission set group assignments. So that actually involves creating a custom report type using permission set assignment as the primary object. And then you'll be able to see all users assigned to a custom permission set or permission set group. That's going to be in beta, but that's just going to make it much easier to understand where you are now. What do you have on permission sets and permission set groups? Next up, you will be able to see what's enabled in a permission set more easily. So you'll be able to display all enabled objects, users' field permissions on a single page. So that's going to make it much, much easier. Now, some other things that we've got, you'll be able to more easily troubleshoot permission set groups. So the most recent error will be displayed on the detail page, and you'll be able to manually trigger a recalculation. So it's going to be much easier to troubleshoot your permission sets. And I've got 2 more for you, Mike. As I said, it's bumper edition of permissions. The object API name and the field API name will be displayed, which they weren't before. And the reason that makes things tricky is we all know that we're guilty of calling fields and objects by the same name. So you can end up with multiple fields called amount or multiple fields called account. And it's very hard to see which one is included in a permission set, but no more. That's going to fix that problem. And then lastly, we've got improved user access policies. So they allow you to define access for groups of users in a single operation. From the Winter 24 release, you'll be able to reference a total of 3 permission sets, permission set groups, or manage package licenses in a user access policy filter. So it's going to make it much easier for you to locate your intended users for your user access policy.
Very good. Lots of things packed there in permissions. Before we get into our 5th one, Christine, I did want to ask you, as I always do, did you feel that there was any one theme, one road specifically that Salesforce was going down with the Winter 24 release?
I think permissions is obviously a huge thing, as we've just seen, so many changes there. But overall, I would say the biggest theme in this release is probably to do with AI and GPT. Now, I purposefully don't tend to cover that in these top release features for admins because a lot of those GPT features are extra or they're not available to everyone just yet. But I noticed that there were some huge sections on different aspects of things like Einstein GPT. I think over the next year or 2, it's going to be AI and Einstein GPT over and over again. And we've been told to expect some really huge announcements at Dreamforce in September about Einstein GPT.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this time next year, that's all we'll be talking about. We're talking with Christine Marshall from Salesforce Ben, salesforceben.com. Please make sure you check that out if you haven't. If you're not familiar, it's a knowledgeable one-stop place to go to learn all things Salesforce. There's terrific Salesforce-related articles and content, helpful get a job section. Obviously, near and dear to Christine's heart is that get certified section. So make sure you check out Salesforce Ben if you're not familiar. Number 5, Christine, on our list for the Salesforce Winter 24 release is just titled Forecasts. What's behind that one?
So this is another team at Salesforce who have been working tirelessly for a couple of years now. We first started to see lots of updates to forecasts happening probably about 2 years ago. I noticed that forecasting, which hadn't had a lot of updates in years and years, was getting all this new functionality. And that is on purpose. There's a whole team working on this at Salesforce. And so we've got a couple of forecasting updates coming up in the Winter 24. And now the first one, very, very simple and doesn't really require any admin involvement. This is really for your users, but they've updated the forecast page. So it looks nicer. It's much easier to understand the data on the page. They've done things like updated some of the labels to clarify them. They've highlighted certain things. They've had updated icons, and highlighting indicates fields that are clickable. So it just makes it easier and more intuitive for your users to actually use forecast pages. And then probably more exciting is there's a new feature called Manager Judgments. So we have a feature called Adjustments already, and this is when managers and also opportunity owners can actually edit the opportunity amount on the forecasting page. Now that amount shows as adjusted on the forecast page, but it doesn't actually impact the opportunity record. So if you had an opportunity and you were forecasting a $50,000 deal, but actually you thought they were unsure about some aspects of it, so it was more likely to be $30,000, you could adjust that in your forecast to reflect $30,000 to give you a more accurate forecast. So we have that already. That's great. But they've added yet another way that we can get more accurate forecasts. So the manager judgment column, which you can add to your forecast types, allows managers to mark opportunities in or out. And it means that the VP of sales or the sales manager, the team manager can really bring their expertise and their knowledge. Sometimes that knowledge that's not always quantifiable. They just have those kind of gut feelings and industry knowledge that something is likely to work out or it's not. And they can mark them in or out. And it's going to give them, again, just a far more accurate forecast.
And the 6th and final release note here that we're calling out, you're calling out for Salesforce's Winter 24 release has kind of a couple of things going on. It's titled Intelligence View for Leads and Contacts.
Yes. So this is very exciting. This might actually be my favorite new feature, especially for admins who are always looking for ways to get more user adoption and user engagement. So what this actually means is when you go on the Lead tab or the Contact tab, traditionally that just has a list view. We love list views. They're great. But now you're also going to get something called the Intelligence View. And that Intelligence View gives you at a glance metrics about the leads or contacts that you're looking at. So for example, these metrics include the total number of records that meet your filter criteria. So perhaps you filtered on contacts in San Francisco. You're going to see the total of those. Records with no completed activities. We know that there's a correlation between activities and securing deals. So that's an important metric. Records with past activity, but no completed activity in the last 30 days. So perhaps things have gone a bit stale in those relations. Records with recently completed activity, but no future activities scheduled. Records with activities that are overdue or due today, or records with activities due in the next 30 days. So that's both leads and contacts that you get those metrics on. And I think that's going to be so helpful to our sales users to help them at a glance understand where they need to take action so they can be proactive and less reactive.
Well, that's just 6 things that are inside the Salesforce Winter 24 release. A lot more to digest, and in this episode's show notes, I'll be sure to put a link there so you can read all the release notes for Winter 24. Christine, a pleasure as always. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today to talk about what's going on in the Winter 24 release. I'm looking forward to having you back, I guess, in early January to go over the Salesforce Spring 24 release. That'll be here before we know it. Have you started your holiday shopping yet, Christine?
You're going to laugh, but I have, Mike. I've bought 2 holiday presents already.
I'm not laughing at you because I have to stick my hand up and go, I have as well. Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Looking forward to having you back soon. And to the audience, if this is your first time listening to our podcast, we just say thank you. I hope you've found it a valuable use of your time. The podcast available anywhere that you get podcasts. Plus, we're also available now on the new YouTube Music website and iOS and Android apps. Check it out there when you can. I'm Mike Boyle from Ad Victoriam Solutions. Thank you for listening to the Salesforce Simplified podcast. Our next episode is just around the corner.
You've been listening to Salesforce Simplified, the podcast from Ad Victoriam Solutions.